Okay, so we are looking at how to solve linear inequalities. So the first thing we want to do is talk about graphing. Okay, inequalities. You have four inequality symbols. You have the two that point to the left, which are less than, and if it has the bar under there, less than or equal to. And then you have the two that point to the right, which are greater than and greater than or equal to. So instead of having an equal mark, you've got one of these in the middle. So if I say your answer is less than 3, that's not just one answer. That's a whole range of numbers. So what you want to do is shade it on a number line, and then we write it in interval notation. So let's practice that first. So again, have your notes printed out and have them in front of you. All right, so let's do graphing on a number line. Okay, so first thing you want to do is says make sure your x is on the left side. So when I look at this, my x is on the left, I'm good. Okay. All right, so what you're going to do is go to the number -2. As long as your x is on the left, you get to shade the way the arrow points. It wants all the numbers greater than -2, so it's all the numbers this way to the right. Okay, you can shade the way the arrow points as long as your x is on the left. Okay, the last thing you want to do is get brackets and parentheses. Okay, less than and greater than get parentheses, and when it has the equal to bar underneath there, it gets a bracket. So this is just a greater than, so it gets just a parenthesis, and you want to face the way you color. So right there at -2. All right, now interval notation may be new to some of you, so I like to label mine. Put your negative infinity and positive infinity down there. You read a number line just like you read the English. You read it left to right. So you started shading at -2 and you stopped at infinity. Okay? -2 is going to get the parenthesis that it got on the number line. Infinity, doesn't matter if it's positive or negative, infinity always gets a parenthesis because you can't equal infinity. Okay. All right, let's do this then. All right, x is less than or equal to 3. So is my x on the left? Yes, so I can shade the way the arrow points. So it says you want to be less than 3, so that's all the numbers to the left of 3. Okay, now you got to decide whether to give 3 a bracket or parenthesis. If you have the bar underneath, like you do here, you give it the bracket. Okay, all right, now label your infinities. Okay, so again, you read it left to right. Okay, so you started at negative infinity and you stopped at 3. Infinity, no matter if it's positive or negative, always gets a parenthesis, and 3 is going to get what it got on the number line, which is a bracket. Okay, let me go ahead and do this number 4 before I come back. What's wrong with this one? Is my x on the left? No, so you want to turn it around. Flip places, and if you switch places, then everything has to switch. Okay, whoever the crocodile mouth was eating before, it still has to eat again, so everything switches. Okay, so I want all the numbers that are greater than -1. So here's -1. I want color to the right, and because of that bar, I give it a bracket. Alright, so here's negative infinity and here's positive infinity. So if I read it left to right, I start at -1 and I stop at infinity. -1 gets a bracket, infinity gets parenthesis. Okay. Alright, this one we're going to talk about in a later video, okay, but I wanted to introduce it now. I want you to remember, if x is in the middle, what I want you to do is shade or color in the middle. Don't make this one complicated. Anytime you've got one and it's got two inequality symbols, okay, what you're going to do is just color in between those two numbers. So color in between -2 and 5, okay, but now you still need to decide about brackets and parentheses. So this inequality goes with the -2, so that's a parenthesis, and this one with the bar goes with the 5, so that is a bracket. So reading it left to right, you start at -2 and you stop at 5, so those won't have any infinities. Okay. Alright, so now let's practice actually putting together where we solve the problems. Okay? Alright, so let's look at these two. Alright, they work just like equations. You're going to simplify first. So nothing I can do over here, but I can distribute that -3. -3 times x is -3x. -3 times 2 is -6. Alright, let's get our x's on the left. So I'm going to add 3x. Alright, because I'm going to run out of room, I'll go ahead and move that constant while I'm here. I'm going to add 11. Get rid of it. Sorry, normally I do that in 2 steps, but I'm going to run out of room. So I get 5x is less than 5. Right? Now, the only rule I have to remember with inequalities is if I divide by a negative number. But what am I dividing by here? Positive. So everything stays the same. X is less than 1. Okay, so we know now what to do. Go to 1. Color everybody less than 1. And because I just have a less than, no bar, 1's going to get a parenthesis. So I started shading at negative infinity and I stopped at 1. And they both get parentheses. This is the kind of answer I'm going to need on the test. Alright, here let's distribute the 5. I get 15 minus 5x. Alright, so if I move my x's, those are gone, and I would need to move that 15, so let's subtract it. So I'm left with a negative 8x is less than or equal to negative 16. Now the only rule that you have to remember, the only thing that makes these different than equations is if I divide by a negative number. Okay, so you have to flip the inequality. The only time you flip it is when you divide by a negative number, and so I'll flip it here, and then negative 16 divided by 8 is 2. And then everything else works the same on all numbers greater than 2, so that would be this way. Because I have the bar, give it the bracket. So, started shading at 2 and stopped at infinity. 2 gets a bracket, infinity gets parentheses. Alright, and one more, one with fractions. So let me actually write it a little bit bigger over here. Okay, so just like with our very first lesson, we want to talk about equations. If you have fractions, don't make it hard. What you want to do is circle denominators that you see and pick a common denominator. So what number goes into both 4 and 2 would be 4. You could use 8 if you wanted to. Remember, everybody gets it. Be fair every term, even that one. Alright, now you cancel out. You say 4 goes into 4 once, 2 goes into 4 2 times, and 2 goes into 4 2 times. Alright, now multiply what's left. So you're going to multiply 1 times x and just get x. You're going to multiply 1 times 2 and get 2. You're going to multiply 2 times x and get 2x. And then 1 times 4 will give you 4. Okay. Alright, let's move things around. Subtract that 2x. And I'm going to add that 2. X is on the left, constant's on the right. So I get a negative x is less than or equal to 6. And now the x is not completely by itself. I divide both sides by a negative 1. So remember, when you divide by a negative, you gotta remember to flip that. Don't flip it every time, only when you divide by a negative. Okay, so x is greater than negative 6. Well, sorry, my number line wasn't quite long enough. All the numbers greater than negative 6, it's everybody this way. And because of that bar, we'll give it a bracket. So, started shading at negative 6 and went all the way out to infinity. Make sure you get that negative 6 bracket. Okay. Alright, so go practice some homework.